Hey everybody, doing a couple things today. I've been doing tons of work on the um, Dungeons of Castle Blackmoor, Blackmoor City, and I've reached final form that I'm going to start to design for active play. And a couple things that I've done I think will be interesting. And I'm going to import a version of the map based on some feedback that I've gotten from my players, things like that, and show you kind of how I approach things. Also, I'm going to show you how you can hop back and forth really well between Dungeon Fog to build maps, export those maps, and drop them into play. And I'm going to use some examples of stuff that, well, I could have done last session, but I didn't. But it's a really good example of how we can use the two platforms to support each other and flow back and forth. Now, honestly, my take on any of these design platforms, Dungeon Fog and the entire, palette of them, is, find one you're comfortable in using and use it. I like Dungeon Fog because if you really wanted to, you could, run Dungeon Fog, manage your campaign completely and totally through Dungeon Fog, including counters, things like that, and use something like D&D Beyond in the background with a die rolling app to keep track of things and do a lot of old school bookkeeping. So you could do that. And Dungeon Fog combines some of the elements of World Anvil and really is a good interim step. But my favorite part, actually, of Dungeon Fog is how easy it is to build buildings in sort of a dungeon, a dungeon space very, very quickly. You can also make great outside maps. It's really flexible. It's just a solid platform. That being said, let's hop into things a little bit here and see what we can come up with. So here, you've seen different versions, Galen Manor. This is the second level of Dungeons of Castle Blackmoor, which I'm working on now. There's a bunch of stuff available that you could go and use if you wanted to publicly. I have a tendency not to. I build my own maps. But anyhow, let's pop up Dungeon Fog and we'll load the Castle Blackmoor map, and I'll kind of show you what I'm finished with. One of the things that I really like about the quality of these maps, and there's a loading thing here, we got to wait for everything to load, is the level of detail you can get. So I've started to work on some of the stuff out in the outside and the flanks here, and I have continued to use the Blackmoor City map kind of as an inspiration, and you can see over here on the Blackmoor City map there's a bunch of stuff. This is Jenkins Hill. And I've recreated that about as good as I could. And I've done some interesting things on it. I'm going to probably at some point go back and reflesh out some of the space outside of the city. But I started finding myself adding things for the sake of adding things. I didn't really want to do that because that didn't feel authentic to me. So I'm going to stop back, take a break from building stuff out, and go back and work on other elements of the campaign that I've been streaming for y'all. So, you've built farm complexes. I've got a nice asset inventory. One of the things you can do very easily that I'm kind of a huge fan of is I'm going to blow this up to 300%. And you can, rotate in, but I have a tendency to like to use the menus. Now, what I've done over here is, look, sheep. Here's a nice little farm. And you can blow right in on that, and in a pinch, highlight it, take a snap of it, whatever you want to do, and turn it into a battle map. And that's true of every place in the city. And I've added some other elements, like, I put an old crash watchtower up in here, and I probably will add some more terrain. But back out, let me show you what we have done here. All right, I have paid, some very specific homage, and you're seeing stuff load here. I've made a pretty big file, and occasionally I bounce up against what can be quickly rendered over on the Dungeon Fog side of things. All right, so let's see what we have here. We have the old mill, built that space in, dropped a couple other buildings in, and I was like, I started doing that. I'm like, hold it, there's going to be some of that. But, Blackmoor has been burned and sacked a couple times, or laid siege to. Not the entire city burned and sacked, but buildings, and I can't imagine that would happen without the outside getting trashed. Here's Castle Blackmoor itself. What I've done is I've chosen to make the entrance external to the Dungeons of Castle Blackmoor, and it could be down in the basement of the main castle, however you want to do it. And this is the evolved castle from my perspective, so you've got the original compound and other things that have been added onto the island. And this is a tad interpretation. It's by no means canon, but it creates Blackmoor City for Blackmoor with just a good play space, and also it kind of reflects the the city that Blackmoor has evolved into, as opposed to the original small town, sort of frontier village that they played pretty extensively in first edition. Here we go. So buildings for the Regency Council, Blackmoor that we've seen, and a bunch of different stuff. Come back in physically is there. We've got the entire city now built out with green spaces. That's the city garrison. So that is the Temple of Henrin. And I'm going to start when I import, and I've already imported it, but when I import, you get a really good feeling for everything you can do. Now, a couple things that I've done that I really, so I've dropped some houses in. I think I need to work the coast out more. Up here in the old mess, that's Wolf Pass, and they've kept the forest intact that was originally there. Svenny's Freehold, I've built over here. And I may go back and rework that. I pulled a stock image and I'm not totally satisfied with it because I've used that image in another place. I'll probably come back and rework that at some point. Dropped a farm in here. There's the old elf tree stump. And then you can see other woods and other terrain that I've added in. So all good stuff and all basic stuff. Now the export function here is fairly straightforward. You go and you say, hey, it's time to export. No, I don't want the grid. All right, because I'm going to layer a grid over in Fantasy Grounds. So you want to knock that out. The default is to have the grid in there, and I don't want it. Whoops. I've got my scale set. My grid size is about 1 inch for here, which really doesn't matter. You could set it up for tiling if you wanted to. And what that would allow you to do, if you have a computer that doesn't have the processing power that mine does, I got like 32 gigs of RAM. It's ridiculous. And one of those new SSD Intel 9 drives. But if you don't have that sort of firepower, you could design this over here and then break it into modules and parts and then import it over into your Fantasy Grounds or your Foundry, or, you could try and get it to work in Roll20, but I think, I'm not a huge fan of Roll20. I think it's a little clunky. But anyhow, you could import the components and you could work with the components. So, and see these options here is for Shoji information or show tokens. You can physically build the entire module in here with your notes, lay out your monster tokens and stuff and play on it. Not what I'm doing with it. Or you could have this as a reference for yourself as a DM, do a pen and paper game, and you play with it over in the background. It's just a really flexible and solid platform. But anyhow, so we hit export, and it'll ask you, well, let's get this ready. And it's got a Danger Will Robinson button, so you can abort. All right, and then, I save it to the place that I want to save it to. For me, that is, let's see, I've got a map assets folder that I save a lot of this stuff in. So I'll save a base copy over there. And then you want to go and you want to save, after you've done that, you want to copy that. And I just always keep an external file from Fantasy Grounds. Control function for me, probably not absolutely necessary, but it makes me feel good. So then you want to go and you want to save it in your campaign folder for Fantasy Grounds. And you put it in your images and you name it. So I save it. And one of the things that you've got a choice, and this is something that we did last time, is I initially had exported this as a JPEG, and it was stunningly effing huge. Or as a PNG, and it was stunningly effing huge, and really caused problems on load. So gave me tons of detail, and on some of the smaller maps, I think that's good because it gives you a really good render when you zoom in. But when I imported it, the players couldn't load. And that was a test that we did before we started playing this weekend. So you want to resave the file as a JPEG. This exports only as PNGs from what I've been able to tell. If anybody finds out differently, ping me. Drop a note in the note here, in either in over on Facebook or on YouTube, or post a note out here on Twitch. But anyhow, convert it over to a PNG file or a JPEG. JPEG's a little bit easier, still gives you plenty of detail, but just is less mass in terms of loading it. So, okay, we have now loaded it, got it moved over, and that's a fairly straightforward process. And let me show you what I'm doing with Fantasy Grounds. And you guys actually hardly ever see, and gals, excuse me for being sexist, you guys actually hardly ever see my full Fantasy Grounds table. I have a tendency to, show very specific pieces. And as a result, let's see, I'm going to use sort of a shrunk screen here and show you what I've done. So you've got images and maps over here. And you can tell as these pop over to the right and left, I have a 3-screen setup, and I'm normally using 2 screens for DMing when I'm running my game. I don't have a Blackmoor file set up for my images. I do for pretty much everything else in here. But we can go down here and City of Blackmoor JPEG. Now what I've done here is one of the things that you can do is you can set a grid. All right. So I'm going to set a grid here. And so if you wanted, you can change the grid to hex if you want to, which will make it grind. I'm going to go back and change it back to squares. You can mask any component that you want. But what I've done is I've made a grid. And that grid, although it's not pretty, allows the players to check ranges and to check times, which is a request that they had made. So it's, let's see, for example, hi-ho. So, for example here, we have, let's see. All right, so for example here, sorry, I got distracted on you. Let's go over here, and we've got Galen Manor, and Galen Manor is right there. So I'm going to go wipe out the last arrow I did just because. Galen Manor is about 620, 650 feet from the University of Blackmoor's central facilities, central towers. So that's useful. Allows the players to track stuff like that. You know, if they want to go to Castle Blackmoor and they're going from Galen Manor, about 1,300 feet, so it allows people to range. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can go in here to any point on here now, and you can build a map out of it if you want to. Now, in a quick emergency, I can blow down there. Look, we've got a battle map. Great. Fight on this area there. That's not super pretty, though. That accommodates really when your players decide, all right, we're going to go do something the DM didn't anticipate and didn't have time to build out backstory for. And I firmly believe that you need to sandbox whenever the players feel it in their heart to chase something that you put out there. And you need to build a really tight, structured narrative as much as you can. And I really work hard to integrate into the narrative player choice. So it's not a matter of, oh, I built, this, railroad you have to hop on. I really try and build a narrative that the players are like, oh, wow, that's cool. I'm going to explore that. And occasionally in the process of exploring that, they're going to go do things that you didn't anticipate. And this map is infrastructure for you. This style, which you can do with any village, any map you have if you're running a city adventure, you can build out. And one of the things I'm very consciously doing with the Dungeons of Castle Blackmoor is you have the Dungeons of Castle Blackmoor below, right? And you have Blackmoor City above. And there's a Waterdeep dichotomy that I think Waterdeep kind of absorbed the aesthetic from the original Blackmoor campaign. Greenwood does some amazing things and really build out a deep and rich culture. Blackmoor had the basic intestinal components, just the gut of the aesthetic of the game. And anyhow, I think that Waterdeep aesthetic of Undermountain and Waterdeep works in Blackmoor. And very much what I'm doing, very consciously, is dungeon crawls are fun, but I actually think as a DM and for a lot of players that nonstop dungeon crawl can be boring. So what I've done is I've interconnected the two. So you have the city. And the city is a deep, rich, I'm being a little redundant there, but it's a very thick, heavy, well-defined culture, and I've been trying to make it more and more. And there are interactions that people, I think, are starting to see in the game where things will happen in the dungeon and there's side effects. Like 2 episodes ago, we had... let's see, 2 episodes ago, Jenna, Bink, and Penny got bushwhacked going out into the Wolfwoods to go talk to the contact that had been handed off to them by Donna the Red. And that's that sort of interconnectivity. So having the players roll back and forth between the two sets up a really good feel for them. Now, they're not going to stay completely in Blackmoor City or in the dungeon of Castle Blackmoor. They're going to have other things that they're going to want to do, and that's okay. That's really what I want them to do. They're going to have places that they're going to travel that I kind of have planned and that they may choose to go explore in depth. And as that happens, we'll move them from other points. But I think probably 80-90% of the campaign will be right here, which is one of the reasons I'm willing to make an investment in time like this as a GM. That's one of the things you got to be conscious of. How much time do you want to invest in what you build? Now, the other thing that I'm going to be doing at some point is I'm going to be releasing all this as a fan component to everybody. And I may wall it off behind a low-cost Patreon or something like that, and have it available for folks so they can go in, they can pull it down. Probably going to build a Foundry piece too also, because I've been playing with Foundry and I really like some of the display options and the interactivities on Foundry. But, okay, anyhow, so got this built, and this is a map. This is a standard map, so you can go and you can pin anything you want. All right, so pinning's fairly simple. If you want to pin an image, you go over here and I can say, okay, give me Galen Manor. Whoops, it's good to spell Galen Manor correctly. So I'll pull up Galen Manor, and I've only got the ground floor really built right now. But what we can do is we go over to Galen Manor, and we drop Galen Manor on there, and I re-imported it, so I have to redo some of my pins. And then we have the Galen Manor map right there. Now, what I would ideally do, all right, and we'll do that right now, is I would make a story component, and Blackmoor. All right, see, I have built out here just kind of a super massive super massive story component. So you've got, how I organize is you've got A stuff, which is Blackmoor stuff. This was background work that I've done. Some odds and ends encounters, and then you're going to have L1, L2, L3, which is really the Dungeons of Castle Blackmoor themselves. And then there's some design work that I've started to do. Like that's my Thralacoot conversion notes, and I will show you guys some of that probably in a separate episode. So we've got everything we've got built here, all right? And it's time to start building a section that is purely City of Blackmoor, all right? And I'm going to use C for this. So, and we're going to use C1, although this nomenclature I think has to be refined a little bit, and I'm going to call it Galen Manor, all right? And then what we'll do is we'll have text that we put in here, but we'll also down in the bottom here embed our maps. So I'm going to lock that so I can move it, which is just one of the funky things that comes here. And I'm used to having a lot more space to work with, so. All right, so we're gonna go over to images again, and we're gonna go take Galen Manor and we're gonna drop it down. Oh, I locked it, duh. I'm going to drop Galen Manor in here down at the bottom so we've got the ground floor. I pulled that pin off. It's no longer on there. And then we'll replace it with a text file. And in the text file, you can do stuff like, okay, so I've got Galen Manor, and I want to put, let's see, in there I want to put, let's see, Frida Galen, as the esteemed PJ Slamma said, which I thought was amusing, is all sin. Delbert's mom has got it going on. And then we will put Reginald Galen in there. And then we will drop Megan Galen in there. And those are the folks that live there. All right, so I'm going to go up above that, and I'm going to label that the family. and bop that down once, knock out the link in terms of formatting, and call this servants. And then I will go over and grab the servants that I built for these folks. So we'll wipe out Galen here. And let's see. We had Asa, who is one of the servants, so we'll drop her in there. And let's see. Caleb, who was the, and I'll put some notes on here. He was the stable boy. Wow, sometimes, you know, words be bad. They be bad. All right, Ebenezer, who sort of the butler, house steward. And just going to burn through here and add these in real quick. And I had Mary, I believe, another one of the servants. Matthias was in charge of their stable. And one of the things that I believe in to run the game and run the game well is to try and use the platform to give the players a sense of who their NPCs are interacting with. You know, I'm not making any money off this stream. This is not a commercial endeavor for me. So I've been using a lot of images that I found out on the internet. You know, if I build a large enough following where that's, you know, necessary, I will go and negotiate commercial rights for all these folks. For any of the art that I use, which I think is your moral and ethical obligation if this is a business for you or if you're making a money off your stream. But at this point, I, you know, am not making a nickel off this, and I am probably years away from having any sort of income like that. For me, this is truly a labor of love. It's something I really enjoy. Okay. I think that is pretty much everybody that I had picked out a specific, that I had picked out a specific, oh, Paulina, right. Paulina was the cook, or is the cook. So we'll drop that in, and we've got Paulina. All right, that sort of fills them all up, I believe. All right, very good. I've got that in another location. I wanted to burn through here real quick to do it. All right, so we've got that built out, and we'll do the same thing, and we'll, you know, space that out, and we'll change the format, and we'll make it like that, and then we'll make the next one maps. And now we've got 3 separate sections. We've got it all in one place. We can click on it. You know, and as I build things out, you can add appropriate text, right? Or, you know, when you pop open Galen Manor ground floor, you can have a key up here, or you could build a separate connection that has the key for the actual rooms if you really need to go to that much detail. I really don't think you don't. You know, it's not like it's an encounter combat site. You need to have pretty loose structured notes. So I am fairly certain Penny at some point is going to try and knock off some art or some statuary out of Galen Manor, just because, one, that's Matt Turrell, and 2, that's Penny's background. Penny doesn't trust, and by pushing, and this is interesting for me as a DM to work with in terms of roleplay, Penny's character is really damaged. She has no reason to trust. I mean, she's passed through the Afridi invasion. She was in one of their prison camps in 10, and she was able to get out of that, but she came out of that scarred in body and scarred in spirit. So a large part of what I'm doing with her, to be perfectly honest with you, is helping the character find trust with Matt, creating environments for him to trust the people he's around, maybe trust the state, lots of stuff, you know. And it's going to be interesting to see how Matt chooses to respond to that. So a lot of what I think you do as a DM is help the characters find their best selves. And sometimes that best self is a really good human being. And sometimes that best self isn't at all. But it's exploration of psychological components of the character that the players are compelled to search through, that they feel are, you know, important for them. And so as a result, you go into some pretty dark territory to get to that sort of awareness and that sort of understanding. So good stuff, really interesting stuff. And for Penny, Penny's challenge seems to be for me. Facing her own darkness, healing, and learning to trust. Now, Jen just sort of stumbled in this as I was feeding her stuff, and she's grabbed right a hold of it and went with it as a role player. Jen, who runs Genebank, is a brilliant role player. But what Jen's done is she's fragile. She's incredibly intelligent. She's fairly charismatic. If I were to pop open her character, you would see Genebank, has a 12 charisma. All right. She's not charismatic. She just doesn't get people outside of the Gnomish community. She and I have made her family, and by extension a lot of Gnomish culture, incredibly distinct. And so for her, understanding the humans, the dwarves, the elves, is incredibly challenging. She doesn't get how they interact, how they trust each other, how they make decisions, how they prioritize information. And so for her, it's understanding other culture, making friends, and coming to understand other people. So that's it. And, Delbert and Idris have really interesting things that they're doing as Thonian nobles. It's cool, completely different flavors of Thonian nobles. You have, someone who is, in Idris, someone who is a bit more of a schemer, a bit more of a politician. And then you have Delbert, and Delbert really is about the good of the state and the good of people. And I've put them both, and I'm putting them both in situations where they have to confront their own value system. And that's part of the role play for us. And this sort of feeds back to that dichotomy I was talking to you about, where you have to be active in the city where there's a lot of role-playing opportunities, and then you have the dungeon, and you roll back and forth between the two. They're all wrapped around each other because there's this huge pool of threat and unknown literally beneath their feet. So, all right. That was Windows telling me, hey, you might have something going on. Check this. All right. So, and I will after the stream. So laid that out. That lets us do some pretty cool things. Now, what's an example of building something out relatively quick? Let's go take something that happened in the last stream. So they went to Arbagosh over here, and they ended up having going into his tent and having a confrontation with him. So we're going to pick this tent right there. All right, now that's relatively low pixel value. I've converted to JPEG, not a great battle map. What we'll do quickly then is I'm going to hide Fantasy Grounds for us, and we will pull up Dungeon Fog. All right. Well, we'll try and pull up Dungeon Fog. Well, I think we'll just try something. Lost my window capture. Interesting. All right, there we go. To catch up in a second. Got disassociated for some reason. Not quite certain. There we go. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to editor. Actually, we're going to exit. And we're going to make a new map. And we're going to call it Arbagosh's tent. All right. So Blackmoor Fishmonger / Agent of Coot. All right. Grid style, dotted rectangle, no. Pluses is fine for this. I'm going to delete it. I just use it as a reference. Map presets. Not really relevant because I do an export. We're going to make a nice little decent map. We're going to keep the distance there, and we will Open the editor. Okay, small little map, not a lot of space. We got a nice tight grid. We're going to look at the background. Over at, I'm going to take a look at something real quick. We've got some sand and some beachy stuff going on. So let me hop back over here. We're going to go find a floor first. This is the background map. All right. And in my collections right now, I'm going to go back to Dungeon Fog. My collection has a ton of good stuff, but we got options for sand. We will take a look at sand and pebbles. Yeah, that works. All right, so next round. Now we're going to do sand. Sand, flat sand with small pebbles. There we go, I like that. So that's the ground that we're going to build this on. I am, building something out from the front end, so we're going to do that. And this is relatively simple. What we're going to do is we're going to build a room. And let's see, wall type is going to be normal. If we want to do some advanced things, we could make some changes, so we'll do that. We're going to make the floor of the tent cracked dry soil, so we'll do that. We will make the outer wall just an outline. And outer wall, I'm going to go do something really simple. I'm going to do some background here. I'm going to make the outer wall simply just, black seam. Don't need to do anything funky at all. And we'll make the inner wall white. And that'll give us a little bit of contrast between the inside and the outside. And my arm's still real there. All right. That gives us some stuff. Outer wall and inner wall thickness. We're going to make very slim. This is a tent, after all. All right, we got that done. And what we'll do is we're going to, because the players are going to go into it, and we've got 5 foot. This room is only about 15. So we got our first wall by 20. I'm just going to draw this room. Bang, we've got his tent. All right. Now we're going to go find a door here, and we don't really need anything huge. One of the things that I cheat with all the time is passage. What that is that's just an opening. And we actually will use big package for the tent, so we'll drop that there. All right, so we've opened that up. There's a way to get in easily, and then we just need a few things real quick. All right, so we can come over here. We've got the Dungeon Fog stuff. We also have my collections. Now, my collections, I use a lot of stuff from Benedus Maps. I've got a couple other folks I use, but they're my main guy. And so we'll go over to my collection. And then we have to wait for all 4,000 of my images to load. That's one thing I'm not a huge fan of. But what we're going to do is we're going to use our stalls and our store assets more than anything else. We'll wait for that to load. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this map. If we wanted to, we could build all the maps around it. We could just crank them all out relatively quickly. Not doing that right now. I'm just showing you how you could build it really quickly. So we're going to build it. Going to reduce its size. We're going to turn around. We're going to drop it over in as a pin over in Fantasy Grounds, and there we go. We will have thrown this map together relatively quickly. It's a good coffee, lads. It's fine stuff. So how much detail do you need on a map? I think of, in a home game when we're all sitting around the table, all right, and we're talking. The minis, the maps are ways to become immersive, right? But the immersion is face to face, and you can have good narrative immersion remotely. But I really think that NPC images, details on maps, are a way to make it more real for your players and help your players become more immersed in the gaming environment. And that is one of my biases. So what I try and do is I try and build out a lot of detail. Now, this is especially true in a place where I know the players are going to just search and search and search and search. right? It's just especially true of that. So when we're building that out, we're going to add a lot of little funky twitchy detail. I'm not necessarily going to do a ton of that with this map because I'm trying to run it for you relatively quickly, but it's always worth considering that. All right. Almost got everything loaded. All right, so I'm going to switch to grid view, and we will pop open market assets. And we got a lot of stuff loaded, so it's going to show us some stuff, and you can see over on the right all the stuff that we have to work with. All right, then we have stalls. We got a bunch of stuff to work with stalls, and he's a fishmonger. So what we will do is we're going to take, that, and if you hold down shift here and you spin it, you can go ahead and make a table here. So we'll drop that there. And this actually has some tents. If you wanted to, you could, drop some tents next to it that don't have as much blown out detail. So if you wanted to, you could drop something like that if you wanted to next to it. I'm not choosing to do that right now. All right, so we've dropped that in, and we'll dress it. All right. We can take a whole bunch of fish here if we wanted to. One of the things I'm going to do is I have over in another inventory, I'm pretty certain, so we'll drop over in Dungeon Fog side of things. I'm going to drop fish. See what it pops up at for me. Food and dishes. Pirates. Nope. Alright, there we go. So we got market assets. Thing of fish. So we'll drop that there. And then we will spin this around. Then we'll drop that there. And we'll take a couple of these. Take, drop that down to about 75%, which I know is extremely exciting for all of you. But, so take it down to 50. Alright, so we'll throw one big fish on here just for interest's sake. I'm going to go and I'm going to find a barrel real quick because, salted fish, stupid little detail. So I'm going to drop a barrel right there. And then we've got inside. Inside he had a table. Alright, we'll take a look at the tables real quick that I've got. And Market Assets has a battering ram. But believe it or not, Tavern Assets has a lot of really good kind of, rough basic tables. So go in here and we'll take that. And it could be a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and spin that. And I'm going to give it 150, make it a little bit bigger so it fills up more of the space. No, not 1,000, Tad, 150. There we go. And that fills up a little bit of the space more effectively. So we'll drop that table in there. And we'll drop chairs up in here in the filter. And one of the things you can do is you can change the rotation in the mirror H and the mirror V of the chairs. And I do that just to break it up so I can grab one chair and go. Chairs. We need S, sensitive filter that way. So Tavern Assets has got stuff. I've got, let's see, more household goods too. That's got quite a few chairs too. These are rustic kind of, not that, I'm going to grab some stools here. Increase the scale by a little bit. We'll make them 150s, a little bit bigger. And I will drop a few stools in here. Alright, this is where he does other business, quote unquote. We'll grab a chest because the players are going to find a chest in here. Alright, what would the game be without some chests? You know what I'm saying. Alright. Alright, we'll make it a clearly chest. So we've done that. See how that kicks? And see how the chairs have a different rotation? It's just a real simple thing you can do to add some detail. So you drop the chest in there. We're going to grab, let's see, I think I have drawers. More household goods. We'll drop a chest of drawers in here that he's got some stuff locked in. Or, we could put crates. I'm going to drop a chest of drawers in here because this is really an office for him. And last thing I'm going to address this with just quickly is we're going to make sacks. All right. So we're going to go grab some sacks real quick. You got some household good stuff. Yeah, we're just going to use sacks. So I'm going to drop one there, one there, one there. All right, so we're throwing some sacks in there. That's enough map for this. All right, don't really need anything else. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and all right. Whoops, wrong thing. I am going to do a -5 there. Oops, not a 15, a -5. And that'll tighten that up. And from the right, we're going to do a -5. Oops, -10. -5. And a -1. And that makes it much, much tighter for us. And just to make it all a little bit more symmetrical, because that's always a good thing. So, got a real quick, easy map. Now, if I were doing this myself, I would have cranked it out in all of 3 minutes. As it was, I was talking to you as we go. So now we got this map built. We will export it. And one thing I didn't name it, but we will export it. And it saved it for you when you went out. And we are going to call it gosh, is tent. Can you change the format here? You can. Whoops, Tad was a dummy. So I'll change it to a JPEG here. Yeah, actually, I'm going to leave this with a PNG. Doesn't matter. That file's so small, size isn't going to be an issue. And I will come back and name that eventually. We're going to turn off the grid because we're going to make our own grid. If I had tokens and stuff, I could do it, all the things we talked about before. And we will apply, and we will export. All right. And save my backup, copy my backup, and go over to your Fantasy Grounds directory for the campaign in question. And I have a bunch of campaigns that I have played over time. I've got a bunch of D&D, some Savage Worlds, some Mutants and Masterminds. Did some work on the Star Trek game at one point. All right, so we'll save Abergash's tent. And we will reduce this. And we will look at our window capture. There we go. So I'm gonna, keep the city there. And what we'll do, I'm gonna close Galen Manor, lock it and close it for now. Got our story stuff over here. We're gonna pop back open our image file. And we should have Abergash's tent. So what we can do is we will build out a story element for it if we want to. All right, I'm not gonna at this point. But you take Abergash's tent and you drop it right there. And then you click on it and we'll scale it. All right. So right click, pull up layers, set a grid. We want this to be about 10 feet across on the inside, which is a big tent. That gives us a nice little grid for the players. All right. And if you want to give yourself a reality test, you can say, okay, it was about 10 feet long. I made it 15. Yeah, close enough. All right. And then you've got Abergash's tent. Now, if you really were going to have this play space going on, you could build it all out if you wanted to. But I've not chosen how to do that. So a lot of the things I've been doing to build this map out of that. And now that I've got sort of my map set, I will go and I will build out all the different components that the players encounter it. Like over in here is where the gnomes are. Right in here is a gnome shop. Penny's family lives right there. I'm going to be building out all those components. Idris's family shop, I believe I pinned right in there. All right, so that's his family's compound where the Regan's Arm and Armor is there. So we're going to make that there. And I will put an apartment relatively close to it for him also. and I'm gonna go through here and build this out. I've been working with scale, scales. Um, it's not an exact medieval city. I've been thinking about that. I didn't necessarily want to have that compacted kind of really heavy stuff that you see in the old street cities in like Frankfurt or York, or Verona, places like that. I didn't want to have that old school packed one right on top of each other feeling. The city has space to operate in. It has a lot of snow, so I've given it more space between buildings, so it feels more like Norway and places up north. And that's got a little bit more space between buildings. It's more conscious of fire and fire control. So I built it kind of on a different grid than you would for your traditional medieval city. So that scales the city a little bit bigger. Part of the reason I'm doing that is, I mean, we have magic, and you can do excavation and build things much more quickly when you can summon elementals and you can do things like that. So the buildings are a little bit farther apart than they would be in a realistic, real medieval city. And there's some spaces that are fairly decent apart. Like if you look at that street is 105 feet across. That's a huge distance. Our normal roads are about 35, 40 feet across. So that's a big distance. But we've done that there to set up more tents and stuff during market days, things like that. So that is the major stuff that I have been doing. And I did a lot of work on the dungeons where I was physically building stuff. And I think for some people that was useful, but there's only so much of that I think is useful. Like watching me put the puzzle pieces together to build a city. But city's now done. City's gridded. City's active. I'll be adding bits and pieces in the countryside, but for the most part, I will be using this basic map and importing and going from there. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. My Facebook is Kilgore's Lair. My YouTube is Kilgore's Lair. Tadkill over here on Twitch, and I probably ought to make that Kilgore's Lair also and get that all consolidated. And if you want to shoot me an email at any time, it's kilgoreslair@gmail.com. And I am going to start talking about design decisions that I've made as I move this into 5e next. So I have built out the Agakud as an adaptation. I'm going to share that with you. I'll probably bring my friend PJ Slam in, who's one of my players. PJ has done a ton of really good work converting stuff over. And something that I did want to show you all also is one of the folks that I just completely and totally respect, given the quality of the work that he's done, is Havard. And Havard is a Blackmoor guy, and he runs the Comeback Inn, and he's got Havard's blog, and he's got the Comeback Inn as a website, and I am active in his stuff, and he's really been historian for Blackmoor in a way just a lot of folks aren't. And hang on a second here, let me pull some stuff up for you real quick. I think you guys can see this. All right, so, all right, tons of books. One of the things that he's done, and this is our Blackmoor stash, and we bought all this stuff, all right, between me and the other folks. This is the book that I wrote down here, Riders of Hawk, which is pretty cool. But, and I did editing, and wrote the Eldering class here, and did a little bit of work on other stuff, but for the most part, I was running an MMORPG. But anyhow, he does some really good stuff. So, Empire of Thonia, he has built out Thonia below, and he has a really outstanding methodology. He talks about the different regions. He's built out maps, and he'll also show you where he has sourced stuff. All right, so He'll tell you where he got the original information and how to, like, together with these. So he did, like, for example, when writing about Blackmoor, I'd like to tie in as much of the material that his publisher can be in ways connected to Dave Arneson's campaign. Nothing the document is included by accident. When writing the document on the Eastern Marshes, I was working based on two assumptions. The region was the same one described in the first fantasy campaigns under Richard Snyder's editions. The Eastern Marshes were the regions where the nobles of Duchy of Ten came from. This meant I could use sources on Duchy of Ten to provide some background as well. Together, these two assumptions meant I had quite a little bit to draw on. Furthermore, I used the material from the ZGG Blackmoor line to figure out things like names of noble families. The names Eastern Marshes was coined by the old dog from the Piazza. So he sources things and he uses the materials in the same way I do to come up with an effective play space. And he is blackmoor.mistara.us, and he does a tremendous amount of really important historical work, building a campaign and building stuff out. I have tremendous respect for the work Havard does, and we use a ton of it as background material. And of course, having worked with Dave, I can tell you that Dave wanted you to play the game that made the most sense to you. You can take anything that I do, use it if you like it. You can take anything that anybody else does and use it if you like it. The important thing is the story that you tell in Blackmoor, and that you engage people in the environment, and you just do wonderful and good things for your players. So I am going to close down this stream pretty quick, I think. I just wanted to show y'all some of the work that I'm doing here at this point. And I think I'm probably going to go stream a game, to be perfectly honest with you. I was playing When the Water Tastes Like Wine. I want to get back into that. And I've also bought a bunch of different games. But I've also bought the Pathfinder Kingmaker game. And that looks really like that old school Baldur's Gate game, which I love. But anyhow, Uther, once and always. And I hope you're enjoying Blackmoor, the stream we're doing and the work that I'm doing in the background. And you have a good day. I will talk to you soon.